The earl tried to raise the cup to his lips as soon as he had filled it, but Byron snatched it away. Why do you do this, Lord Byron?" asked. Every time the Count filled his glass, he prevented him from drinking. He even suspected that he did it because it seemed like a waste to drink all the alcohol they gave him. But, luckily, that wasn't the case. "Why are you so angry? What do you care if the prince becomes crown prince or not? Hey? What does it mean? Oh. Have you already forgotten that I promised you?" Byron had promised that if he ascended the throne, Count Senesbon would be crowned king. Although he did not give specific details, the Count's face lit up as if he had just remembered it. There's no way I could forget that promise, right? I must have shown my worst face for no reason, right? He was really down to earth and easy to get along with, which is why Byron liked him. Byron smiled, leaned back in his chair and crossed his legs. It was time to talk about the Count's son, who had dared to touch what belonged to him. "I also have something to discuss with the Count." "What's happening? Please speak frankly." As Byron took a sip of his drink and opened his mouth, the Earl lowered his gaze as if he would listen to everything he said and asked. "Do you know that your son is bothering my dog?" Byron asked with a grim expression. His voice denoted a displeasure that he couldn't completely hide. "Hey? Your dog? Had he brought a dog?" The Count, with an apathetic expression, seemed lost in thought for a moment, then realized that he was referring to the girl he had called his daughter, and fiddled nervously with his lips. "Is that child still like that? I told him clearly that there was no need. No, I told him not to do that." The Count was about to say, "There is no need for that," but then he realized his slip of the tongue and changed his mind. But it was too late. Byron had instantly understood the Earl's intentions. It seems that he coveted the position of son-in-law of the Emperor. Was he not a man who revealed his true feelings with such transparency? He didn't even know how to hide his dark and lustful side. Still, he might have mistaken Isla for Byron's biological daughter, so he decided to play it down. The important thing was not the past, but how to discipline his son in the future. "It will be better for your son's future if you keep him in line. Of course, I will explain it well. I'm sorry for causing you trouble as such a useless son." The conversation with Byron quickly relieved the tension he felt over the appointment of the crown prince, but the Earl, who had other concerns, drank his wine anxiously. And, after returning home drunk after drinking with Byron, the Earl woke up his son and sat him down in front of him, despite his wife's protests. Gerald, in his pajamas and with a magpie's nest perched on his head, still didn't understand the situation. He just yawned sleepily. "Gerald, right? Didn't your father tell you clearly that you didn't have to show off to the girl in the annex?" Less than a day after telling him, "Be nice to that girl," she changed her mind and said it wasn't necessary as soon as Byron told her the girl wasn't her biological daughter. She didn't understand why her son kept hanging out with her. "I heard you were throwing a tantrum, demanding to bake a chocolate cake to share with the girl. What were you thinking about?" Gerald, who had just woken up from his father's scolding, made a displeased face. "Father, you said, you don't have to do it, not don't do it. Don't I have the right to do whatever I want?" It was a pretty strange reaction. He was already a teenager, so his behavior was always strange, and he seemed quite offended when the Count woke him up and started yelling at him. "What kind of custom is that? Does this father force you to do something bad? Let her go. She is not well." The Count's face, already flushed with alcohol, was now flushed with rage, ready to explode at any moment. Luckily, there was no smoke coming out of his ears. "Father, why do you act like this? You keep changing your mind. Who do you expect to keep up? One day you tell me to look good, and the next day you tell me it's not necessary. You haven't even given me a decent explanation." but Gerald had no intention of giving in. He didn't even know who the guest of honor in the annex was, but he told her to be nice to the girl, and then told her it wasn't necessary. I was angry and frustrated because there were so many things I didn't know. That. It's a secret even for this father. That being the case, shouldn't you at least explain it to me well? If you don't want me to go near that brat, at least tell me why. That way you won't have to worry about whether I understand it or not. I'm not a child anymore. As a child, he obeyed his father's orders without even knowing why, but now he had no intention of doing so, so Gerald crossed his arms and glared at his father. Seeing him, the Count felt the last vestiges of alcohol disappear and grabbed his head. His son was giving him a headache. Enough of the reasons. If I tell you to stay away from her, stay away from her. No, I don't want to. It was a tense argument in which they stared at each other for a long time and grumbled, with neither showing any intention of giving in. And after a long silence, it was decided who would win. There is no such thing as a father who always convinces his son. In the end, the Count relented. So, you're saying you'll listen to me if I tell you the reason? Let me hear it first. If your father tells you a secret, will you be able to keep it? The Count asked in a very low voice. Gerald, amused by the word secret, nodded without even crossing his arms. Well, that's, Count Senesbaum began to explain, omitting Byron's true identity. He said that since she was such a valued guest, he wanted me to take care of her in case he married the daughter of that house later, but in reality, he said that it was not necessary, since the girl was not his biological daughter. You can't tell anyone. Not even that girl knows, so don't tell her. Understood? The Earl made a gesture as if closing his mouth, and Gerald nodded with a somewhat uncomfortable expression. Do you understand now? Why shouldn't you approach that girl? The Count asked seriously, after finishing his story. You must understand it by now, he hoped. But that vague hope faded. No? It was because Gerald said it with bad intentions. Why? What is the problem? What difference does it make if she's not his biological daughter? I like that girl. Of course, Gerald's attitude had to change a little. The thought that someone who isn't even his daughter would be so expensive began to run through his head. Maybe it was a good thing. He had approached her cautiously because she was the daughter of a distinguished guest, but now that she was not his biological daughter, it might be easier to play with her. Gerald, you brat. Are you really not going to listen to me? The Earl shouted, his throat red, but Gerald picked his ear with an expression of annoyance, as if a fly had landed on it, and stood up. I'm going to bed first. I need to go to bed early to grow. I'm still growing. For a moment he would get angry and say, I'm not a child anymore, but then when it was his turn to speak, he would back away and say, I'm still growing, and the Count felt like he was going to explode. But at the same time, he felt so sorry for his late father that he wondered how he had wasted his youth like that. I have no idea where that came from. The Countess, who had been listening silently from the side, glared at her husband and spoke in a voice that seemed to know the origin perfectly. Duke Roderick Weishafen paced anxiously in front of the delivery room. The due date was 2 weeks away, but labor had already begun and the delivery room had been hurriedly prepared. It wasn't their first child, so it was nothing new, but the tension remained. No, it seemed to have even increased. When her first daughter, Isla, was born, she was in enviable health and her mother was young. 13 years later, despite the careful care of the sorceress Candace Epasher, the baby was small and weak. From inside, Ophelia's pained moans could be heard. At first they were intermittent, but the intervals became shorter and shorter, until they seemed endless. Not yet? Roderick asked anxiously as he heard his wife's heartrending scream. He had lost count of how many times he had asked himself that question. Calm down, Roderick. Everything will be fine. I'm here for you. Candace, who was waiting next to him just in case, patted Roderick on the arm and said, "So what?" Without a doubt, Candace's presence was a comfort. Thanks to her magical assistance in childbirth and the excellent potions she prepared, it was unlikely that anything would go wrong for mother and baby. Still, his anxiety did not dissipate easily, so Roderick covered his face with his hand and sighed. At that moment, the cry of a baby echoed from the delivery room.